Okay, we are recording. All right, well, good day, everyone, and welcome to the broadcast. And today I have a little surprise for all of you here today, a very special broadcast indeed. I am here today with Charlie Zeiss of the Pyramid Science Foundation, and he is here with me today to talk about the power of pyramids, sacred geometry, alternative history, the Russian research, and suppressed information, suppressed ancient knowledge. Charlie, thank you so much for being with me here today. It's an honor and a privilege, and yeah, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Greg, for having me on. It is a pleasure to be with you as well today.
Awesome. So, yeah, I'm gonna hand you the reins because this is something that Mark Atwood's audience has looked into, but my audience maybe specifically
Okay,
um, has not
sure.
ever been exposed, at least directly, to any of this. And so I'm going to hand you the reins, and I'm gonna let you
Okay.
take it and just throw some knowledge on us today.
All right. Well, that sounds fine. And if you have questions as we go forward, please stop, and I'll be happy to try to fill in some blanks. Um, for those of you who, like me, up until 5 or 6 years ago, uh, didn't know much about pyramids, wondered why there was all this to do about them and so forth. I got interested in them about 6 years ago when David Wilcock did a 10-part series on Gaia TV. He had a series called Wisdom Teachings. And on that series, he did a 10-part series on the Russian pyramid research. And I was a science major in college, might have actually become a doctor if I hadn't had a bad car accident, which was going to force me to take a fifth year. I had to drop out for a while, and I ended up going to Wall Street instead. But anyway, I have always been interested in scientific applications of so-called alternative healthcare. Even though I think that's the real thing rather than what we call the real thing, which is
Right.
Western allopathic medicine. So I took an immediate interest in pyramids because of the science that had been done in Russia. And unlike our government in the United States, the Russian government actually funded this research in large part to try to find out how pyramids could act as an inexpensive way to minimize public health expenditures and improve public health generally. So a lot of the research that was done in Russia deals specifically with health. And, we'll get into some of that here in a minute. But that's essentially how I got started. At the end of David's series, he actually said that there was a company online that was selling the very kind of pyramid set that I'm sitting in today and that I do sell, on my website. But turns out that that company had to post a notice saying that, no, we don't sell them. But that had piqued my interest enough to say, well, gee, maybe I ought to make some of these and see if they really work. And one thing led to another. So it's been about a 6-year journey now, exploring this and not knowing much of anything about pyramids beforehand. I have really learned an awful lot, Greg, over the last few years. So it's been a real wild ride, and it's been really the most enjoyable time of my life, going on research that's taking me down any number of rabbit holes, some of which you mentioned at the beginning of the show. So, what I might do first is to talk about the health research itself, because what
Okay.
I'm most interested in is helping people to find an inexpensive uh, uh, way, drug-free, to improve their health. And so a lot of the information that I'm going to talk about today is timely because it talks about our immune system. And with all of the to do about COVID and so forth, it's certainly a timely topic. But to go through some of the research that was done in Russia, they did a lot of this initial research on mice. But what one controlled experiment that they did, they took a particularly strong strain of typhoid fever virus, and it's called Salmonella typhimurium, and they injected two sets of mice with this virus. One, the control group was just in a normal cage, but the experimental group was actually housed inside of a pyramid. Now, the results are pretty phenomenal because in the control group, only 3% of the mice survived in this experiment, but 10 times that amount, or 30%, survived when they were living under the pyramid. And in a less massive dosage, 6% lived in the control group, and 60% lived inside the pyramid. So a tenfold increase in the mortality or survival rate of the mice that were exposed to the pyramid energy. In another example, they took mice that were and they analyzed their fighting behavior. And it was interesting, when they were put inside of a pyramid, the number of fights that they would have decreased enormously. And so that prompted them to do this with humans. And they actually went on to do a study with the Russian prison system. And this is kind of an interesting counterpart to this whole discussion. You don't have to sit inside the pyramid necessarily to get the energy from the pyramid. You can actually consume something as simple as table salt that's been stored inside the pyramid. And that's what they did in the prison system. They stored table salt that they were going to be using for cooking in the pyramid, and distributed it to the inmates. It was about 6,000 inmates. And the wardens and all, I think it was 20 different prisons throughout the country, all said that it was like somebody had changed out the prison population, because all of the violent behavior disappeared. So it clearly has an impact not only on your immune function, but it has behavioral aspects, very positive behavioral aspects as well. When in 2019, before the COVID situation started, we went to about 15 different expos around the country, and we found to a person that everyone felt peaceful after having been in the pyramid. So there's something about this energy field that it harmonizes and makes people more peaceful. But to get back as well to some of the public health benefits as well from the pyramid, when there are environmental toxins, for example, airborne pollutants and carcinogens, there was a specific situation where there was a very toxic chemical plant in Russia that had been spewing out toxins for years. It was so bad that they had actually cleared out all of the people that lived around this plant for a range of 25 kilometers. But there was still a town about 40 kilometers downwind from this plant, and there were a serious number, close to 800 people a year, were dying from airborne carcinogens. And what they did was to build a pyramid midway between the plant and this city. And within 3 years' time, the number of people dying from airborne carcinogens went from about 780 down to less than 10. So
wow.
just amazing results. And I'll give you one more just to pique people's interest. And that's a study that was done on severely premature babies. And these, for those in the audience unfamiliar, if a child is born very prematurely, they have an extremely underdeveloped immune system. And using specific test indices, these children, were expected to die, and typically did die within a few days of birth, because their immune system was so poorly formed due to their premature birth. Well, what they did was they took water in this case and stored it inside the pyramid, and they gave a few drops of water to these premature babies in this case, and where in a control group, virtually all would have died, every single one of them survived. So there's some amazing properties that are to be found here in the energy fields inside these pyramids. Finally, and I'll stop with the health research with this. People might ask, and rightly so, how does this work? Why does it have this kind of an effect? Well, as it turns out, whether you are immature, premature baby, or in my case, say more elderly, your thymus gland is not necessarily functioning as it should be. When you're young, you're still getting the immunity from your mother until your immune system develops on its own, and that takes a period of time to accomplish that. But as we get older, our thymus glands, which are located basically up here in the chest, that is the gland that produces what are called T cells. T cells are the cells that go throughout your body and search out for things that they know shouldn't be in there, like a viral infection or something along those lines. And they're the ones who call out the brigade, so to speak, to marshal up the immune function inside your body. Well, as we get older, that thymus gland shrinks, it becomes fatty, and it stops producing these T cells. So what they found in a study in mice, was that the size of the thymus gland in the older mice, actually it had regenerated back to normal size and had started to reproduce larger numbers of T cells, just like we would have in a younger mouse or a younger human being. So it essentially restored the immune function in these mice, and also it increased the length of life of these cells. And that's important as well for immune function, because when your T cells live longer, that extends essentially the institutional memory of all of these other things that it's been exposed to before, and it hastens the immune response in the human body. So there's all this really, really great research going on. And really, this is the reason why I decided a couple of years ago that we needed to set up a foundation to replicate this research and also to expand upon it, to get this information out to the public. So that's kind of a summary of what's going on with the health research in Russia.
Yeah, and I think that the main thing that we can take from these pyramids, it's all about frequency.
That's right.
It's all about frequency, and we're all about frequency. I mean, frequency is the currency of the planet. It's the currency of the universe. It's all about frequency, and that's what these pyramids emit. They emit a proper frequency into that space. Whether it's a good space or a bad space, they emit that proper frequency.
That's right. And to follow up on that, I knew very little about Plato and the things that he taught, but I've become a great student of what's called the quadrivium. For his advanced students, Plato taught the quadrivium, and that's four basic areas of study. One is numbers, or mathematics. The second one is geometry. The third one is vibration, music, harmony, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same. And finally, cosmology, which is the creation of the universe. And this is stuff that I never learned it in college, and I don't think anyone else does. I don't know of any school in this country that actually approaches education from this classical understanding, because what you realize is that math or numbers do become geometry, like this pyramid. You can take numbers in a triangle, and you can come up with a mathematical formula for geometry. Geometry also will create harmony, and we can talk vibration. And so we'll discuss that a little bit later. And finally, that becomes part of the process of creation itself. Vibration in the appropriate pathway will result in the physical reality that we experience. So all of these things are interrelated, and the study of the quadrivium will teach you that the world is harmonious. There was a 19th century metaphysician whose name escapes me, but I love his famous quote, which is that we are judged by our sins, not because of them. And what that's trying to tell us is there is a very specific mathematical principle. What we put into the universe in terms of our thinking and our consciousness is what we get back out. And therefore, there's not a need, or in fact, I might even say the existence of an external judging entity that plays favorites. This is a very mathematical, precise process. So once we understand that principle, we can change our thinking and change our lives. So, these are all very, very heady concepts, and they're concepts that many people don't really want to come to grips with, because when you realize how the universe is created through thought and consciousness, you become responsible for what happens to you. And most people don't want to cope with that, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we're in that vacuum right now with many people across the planet. Here we are shouting for everyone to take ownership and responsibility. And that's what this sacred knowledge is. That's essentially what it does. It drops it right on your foot and says, okay, time to take ownership, time to take responsibility, step up to the plate, do your job, because what goes around comes around. What you admit to the universe will come back to you. What you manifest will come to you. That's happening now more and more now as we, go further and further down the road in this ascension journey. Manifestation is happening, faster and faster and faster. So it is very heady knowledge. It is, and it's a lot for someone to wrap their head around initially, but.
And the more, the thing that I think is once you can kind of come to grips with some of the things I'm going to talk about here, this knowledge has actually been actively suppressed. And
Sure.
The audience probably would, I want to tell them some specific examples of that, so that they can appreciate this geometry and what institutions such as the Catholic Church have done to suppress it over time. For those of you who are old enough to remember a concept called the dunce cap, that is Greg, I don't know if you know it, but when I was a kid in school, we knew about the dunce cap. It was an object of derision, really. If you were a slow learner, you would wear this cap that has this exact geometry to it, and you would have to go sit in the corner as an object of ridicule. Well, the dunce cap actually started in the 12th century, 13th century, excuse me, by a Franciscan monk named John Duns Scotus. And he was a contemporary of St. Francis of Assisi and was widely recognized in his earlier years as one of the real intellectual giants in the Catholic Church. But what happened was he looked at the witch hats of the day, and he decided to try wearing one, and he found out that it did give him a connection to his higher self, to God, however you want to phrase it, and that he was finding this his higher self more easily. He started to develop a concept of a metaphysical God, not an anthropomorphic judgmental God. Well, I guess the Catholic Church was not going to have anything to do with that. So they began to ridicule his work. And it over time, the dunce cap, which was actually a source of enlightenment and was for witches and warlocks and so forth of the day and others, that became an object of ridicule. So the church took that and kind of turned it on its head to hide that information from us. And so it's fascinating that, we don't know that kind of information. You have to really go search for it.
Yeah.
The church also, in terms of sacred geometry, in terms of music, all of this geometry is based on a concept, and I should step back and tell your audience, of what's called phi, P-H-I. And that's not pi like, the circumference of a circle, P-H-I. P-H-I is a scaling ratio that the universe uses in the creative process. And the number itself is 1.618003399. It goes on forever. But essentially what the idea is, if you have a piece of, just say a loaf of bread that's 1 foot long, and you want to cut it into two parts such that the larger part is to the smaller part as the whole is to the larger part. And that's maybe doesn't make a lot of sense, but A plus B divided by A, or A divided by B, is equal to the same ratio as A plus B divided by A. Well, the only number that comes up with that is this phi ratio. Phi is 1.618. And you can develop that as well through what's called the Fibonacci numbers. I don't know if you're familiar with those, Greg, but
No.
there was a mathematician in, I believe, the 13th century, and his name is Fibonacci, and he realized that if you took a series of numbers, started with 1, 0, and 1, and all you do is you add those two numbers together, you get 0 and 1, you get 1. Then you add the previous number, which is 1 and 1, and you get 2. Then you add 1 and 2, and you get 3. Then you add 2 and 3, and you get 5, and then 8, 13, and so forth. Well, it's interesting that when you start to play with those numbers, you end up, when you take ratios of those two results, they will bounce around up and above this magic number of 1.618, but they will trend to that. That ratio is what nature uses to create. And there's a lot of science to prove that. Guys like Dan Winter, for example, has shown this. Nassim Haramein has done research proving, with similar results. So we know that that is an angle that's important in nature. And interestingly enough, it shouldn't be a surprise now that you're starting to understand this. This is the geometry of that of phi itself. It is the geometry that nature uses to scale from thought to the physical. So we've got all these numbers going on, but the point I want to make is that we have attributed all this knowledge to Westerners like Fibonacci and Plato and Pythagoras, when in fact, all of this knowledge goes back to the ancient Vedas, which go back 15,000 plus years. And this knowledge is demonstrated in Hindu temples, Buddhist temples, going back to 2000 BC. So Platonic, and we'll talk about Platonic solids in a little bit, but all of this kind of what we think was knowledge that was developed by the Greeks or, in Europe, actually is, comes from far further back in history. And, at least as far back as we can trace it, it comes from India. So you'll find, and this, one of the major things that got me on this path, and I don't know if I mentioned it, Greg, I'm writing a book now. I decided last summer, okay, I've got too much information here to try to keep doling it out in little drips and drabs on videos. But so I have done a pretty in-depth study of finding this geometry in man-made structures. And it does. It starts with Hindu temples, yeah, Buddhist temples. That knowledge goes from those cultures, ultimately makes its way to the Middle East, where it begins to get incorporated after the Crusades into the Gothic cathedrals, for example, into castles, and into church steeples in Europe and around the world. It's also found in synagogues and mosques. So there's there's a lot of history to this from a religious standpoint. It's in our buildings, like the castles, for example. Most of the castles in Europe, especially those in Germany, have this very geometry and all of these cones that we see on the top of castles. And there's a reason for that, because we'll get into free energy later, but the thesis is that people use this geometry to gather and to use a free energy technology that we've lost over the last several hundred years. So there's just a lot, there's a lot of fascinating stuff in the human body. It's in our DNA. The spiraling of the DNA and the geometry of the slope matches that of the pyramid. Even a funny one, just your nose right here. You measure this geometry and it's exactly the same as well. So there's plenty of examples of this information throughout nature. So
yeah.
But the key question from my perspective for your audience is, with all of this information around us, why is it that this is the trick? Why is it that this information has been suppressed from us and has been withheld? And that's a real challenging one. But I mean, I believe that I know it's been done on purpose, because the church, for example, forbade this knowledge from going forth in the 13th century, and it's kind of continued on. I've actually talked to some manufacturers of church steeples, contemporary church steeples, because this information, this knowledge of the sacred geometry in our church steeples has been lost. They don't even, they don't understand, nor do they think in terms of sacred geometric forms. They think about the aesthetics of architecture now when they're doing this. So all of this knowledge has been lost, and hopefully now is beginning to become accept or understood again. All I'm doing is rediscovering ancient knowledge that's been hidden from us for thousands of years.
Yeah, and thank you so much for doing that. And there are many others out there who are doing that. But yeah, well, the biggest reason why they suppress this, and why they have for thousands of years, Charlie, is because they knew that us knowing this ancient wisdom, this ancient knowledge, would have us evolve over them.
Well, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, where would we, what type of a world would we live in today if we all knew this knowledge? Not only knew this knowledge, accepted this knowledge, loved this knowledge, appreciated this knowledge, and implemented this knowledge on a daily basis into our lives. The universe would be a very, very different place.
It would be, and
Yeah.
that's why I'm out trying to get the word out on this, because our healthcare system could change dramatically if we could and would use tools such as this to harmonize and optimize our own energy fields around us. And from a personal standpoint, Greg, up until the time I started making these pyramids, I would every winter after the holidays, I would get a horrible chest cold, and I'd suffer and hack on, for a month. As soon as I started making the pyramids, I keep one in my bedroom where I sleep. But as soon as I did that, I haven't had a sniffle in 6 years. So I've had aches and pains disappear. I broke my ankle in a accident. I kind of tripped and fell down some stairs, and I started compensating in my gait, and so my right knee started to ache as well. Once again, as soon as I started using the pyramid, those aches and pains have disappeared, and that's typical and characteristic of people who decide to use these pyramids for their own benefit. So,
well, again, it's that frequency. You were getting and I experienced something similar as well with sinus infections, especially as a child. And what they
Hmm.
do is they give you very expensive surgery. They go up in there and they clean it out and they align your septum, and then they say, okay, you're fine. Well, you are for 10 years, and then they start coming back.
Right.
It has nothing to do with surgical precision. It's frequency. There are energies and frequencies within your body that are unbalanced and that
That's
are
right.
unaligned, and they need to be put back in place. And yeah, so I experienced something very, very similar until I started using other techniques and started incorporating other practices to
Sure.
realign that frequency. Now, I didn't use pyramids, but I used other energy practices like crystals, stones, and just really changed up my herbal routine as well, to put
Sure. Sure.
that unbalanced frequency back in balance. So
Well,
it's a very, very real thing.
well, and I want to send you a pyramid, so now you'll be able to experience that as well. So give me your address afterwards, and we'll make sure you get one. But
Sure.
other things that have happened to me as well, I won't attribute this totally to the pyramid, but I was quite overweight 6 years ago, and I've lost an awful lot of weight as a result. I think some of that can be attributed to the peacefulness. I think that my cortisol levels started to go down, and even though I was trying to do the right things, exercise, structured water, eat right, and so forth, as soon as I added the energy field of the pyramid to the whole regimen, the weight loss was much faster and easier for me. So, it's just another benefit. So we are undertaking, by the way, and I guess I should discuss this now, a fairly significant study of, we're trying to get healers and people who need uh, uh, healings of various sorts to work with us in developing some reasonably comprehensive data on how the pyramid can improve people's health. And so what we're in the process of doing, and it happened really on Mark's show. It came to me as kind of a spur of the moment idea that I would offer uh, or we'd put together a group of healers and subjects and try to study this in a comprehensive way. And hopefully this will serve as a basis for people's further understanding of and our understanding of specific ways in which this pyramid can be used. But people with aches and pains, people with EMF sensitivities, people
Hmm.
with high blood pressure or diabetes, or those kinds of things. If you're interested, I'd love for you to contact me and tell me what's going on. We have a special program where I'll give you, a discount off of your pyramid over and above, Greg, what I'm going to offer to the audience today. But what I would like to do is have people contact me at stargatepyramids@yahoo.com, and I'll be happy to respond to you. But we've got a group of people who are going to be helping us with a variety of modalities that they want to try with the pyramid. The pyramid is a tool, and it can be used to enhance basically any other type of energy healing mechanism. It acts as essentially an amplifier and magnifier of energy fields, and as a result, things such as Reiki, for example, to use a kind of a hand healing or energy healing, sound healings as well. People can use. In fact, I know Mark did that the other day with you guys. He was talking about a friend of his who was sitting inside the pyramid, and he rang I forgot was he
The
using a tuning fork, I
tuning
think.
fork, yes.
Yeah, it was a tuning fork, and a person with arthritis, I guess, was sitting inside the pyramid, and boom, the pain went away. So, those are the kinds of things that we're going to be doing, to document this. So we've got I'm also working with a woman in Australia. I've been meaning to do this for a long time. She is a healer. She works with wheelchair bound patients. And so I just today before the show, I went in and I designed and built for her a special pyramid that will allow for wheelchair access, so that the patients can get in. I'm shipping that off to Australia tomorrow, and but that's the kind of thing that we're looking to do. So anybody who's got ideas like that or interest in helping or being helped with Pyramid Energies, contact me at stargatepyramids@yahoo.com, and I'll be happy to talk to you about it and give you a coupon code to make it more affordable.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll definitely make sure to put all your information in the show notes as well, Charlie, so that people can contact you and get in touch. Yeah, it's amazing because this research needs to be out there. We need to, at the very least, venture into these realms and to see what results these tools can produce for us. It's the same thing with cannabis. They've been suppressing that for years, and we know so much, but we also know so little.
That's right. That's right.
And that's why we need to dive into this. We need to seek, alternatives beyond the men in the white coats, beyond Western medicine.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
My significant other is a holistic dentist and a naturopath. Oh. So she, speaking of CBD, I mean, that's a classic example. I mean, some of her patients are using that, and she uses it as well for pain, and it's a great alternative. But we've got testimonials of people who've been in auto accidents and things with back surgeries who sit inside the pyramid, and they're able to do things that they haven't been able to do for years. So, all of these alternative so-called energy modal or healing techniques are worthy of our consideration and usage, because they really are the future. Vibrational and energy medicine in particular, I think, of medicine and healthcare. So yeah, we have 99, I'm in the Medicare group, age group, and 99% of American healthcare Medicare expenditures go for chronic disease. And Western medicine has nothing to provide in terms of curing or providing an ultimate solution for chronic disease. So we have to look to these alternatives to get to the results that we should have been getting for the massive amounts of dollars that we spend on our healthcare system. I mean, we have the most expensive healthcare system with the worst outcomes in the Western world, or in the industrialized world. So, we need to start, doing our own homework, and that's the only future I think any of us have, is taking our healthcare into our own hands and dealing with it ourselves. So.
Yeah, instead of healthcare, it should be caring for our own health. Taking that ownership and responsibility, and seeking, taking the bold step, taking the brave step, and seeking that alternative, and just seeing where it goes. And again, as you said earlier, this is all very heady stuff. This is a lot for people to wrap their heads around, especially those that are so used to industrialized medicine, going to the doctor on a regular basis, taking their medication, following the script, as it were. This is something that is a shell shock for them. It's definitely a Rorschach test for their psyche to be able to step away from that and to seek an alternative such as a pyramid or cannabis or vibrational medicine. It is a lot, but you're right. It is the future. It is indeed the future. Whether people agree with it, accept it or not, it will be our future. Because humanity, mankind is craving the alternatives, regardless of whether what anyone else out there thinks or feels. We are craving the alternatives, and we need those alternatives because we need to step away from the toxicity and back into our own divinity. And that's what these alternative tools will, help us accomplish, is stepping out of that toxicity and back into our own divinity.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
One of the topics that I didn't discuss in my litany earlier is the whole area of 5G and EMFs. And, maybe we could talk about that for a minute.
Sure.
We've done some academic research with the testing capabilities that we have, which are subjective, but we've had dowsers douse energy fields with the pyramids in the presence or absence of EMF emitters. I did some research about 3 weeks ago on that with an expert dowser, and what it proves is that the life force energy, even if you're when I would hold up my cell phone with a YouTube video going on it, my life force energy just standing outside the pyramids, was cut in half, and by just holding that away from me. So it has a huge impact. We've tested it with a device that my significant other uses called a Lecker antenna. Now, that's essentially a frequency-specific a tool that was developed by an Austrian physicist about 100 years ago, initially to develop ley line, or to measure ley lines and so forth in the Earth, but it's been modified. But it has a specific frequency of electromagnetic pollution, and it shows that when you're inside the pyramid or near it, that frequency is alleviated or remediated. So there seems to be some real power there, but that's another area that we're going to be checking. I've been talking to a lot of EMF sensitive people this week, and so we're looking forward to seeing how the energy fields from the pyramid can help to alleviate that. But that's a separate topic. That's a whole show right there. Is trying to remediate EMFs, and there's a lot of tools that I can even away from the pyramid that I can suggest to people. One is to digress, to look at both. They're called power line adapters and Stetzer filters, which are the power line adapters will allow you to stop using the Wi-Fi router in your home. You can hardwire all of your phone, your laptop, and so forth with these using your existing electrical outlets in your home to carry the signal throughout your home. And you can do that, and after you install these, you can turn off your Wi-Fi, and that is a huge emitter of EMFs. Another topic is dirty electricity. So-called Stetzer filters will remediate that, and that's another major cause of EMFs in the home. So there are ways of getting rid of this stuff relatively easily, and really with not a lot of expense. To wire your home with Ethernet cable costs thousands of dollars, but you can use these power line adapters, for example, probably for under $200 you can wire your whole home and get rid of Wi-Fi, and that's just an enormous benefit. So there are all these things that we need to be considering in addition to the pyramid. So another aspect of the pyramids that I'll talk about quickly, there are ways to enhance the energy fields of a pyramid. Size is certainly one of them, but as your viewers are going to obviously be aware, the major pyramids, the Giza pyramids, the pyramids in all over the country, in say the Yucatan in Mexico, they're all built with limestone or granite, but it's a hard stone that contains crystal. And crystals are magnifiers of energy. So, we also have certain types of enhancements that we put inside the pyramid pipes, and also there are things called capstones that will enhance the energy fields. We are developing, and I sell now a device called a Caduceus Coil, which produces scalar waves inexpensively. And the science behind these. First of all, you have to get the visual. if think about the symbol of healthcare in the world, it's these two snakes wrapped around, going around a coil.
Yeah.
Well, that's the Caduceus coil. It's hiding in plain sight. And so, what we have found, again, we've tested these. It improves and amplifies the energy fields inside the pyramid enormously. And so, we're going to be testing those as well to see what impact that has on human health and the ability of the pyramid to assist in remediate, taking care of some of these aches and pains and illnesses. So, and there's good science that indicates that a caduceus coil producing scalar waves, that information that's the preferred way for DNA to communicate not only with the rest of the body but with the outside world is through scalar wave technology or scalar waves. So
Yeah.
there's all these interesting things that we're doing as well to enhance the energy fields and hopefully the effectiveness of these pyramids. So,
Well,
but,
I love that because it's just to me, with everything you just mentioned there, just seems like the possibilities are endless with these pyramids. We
yeah,
truly don't know until we really just continue researching. And yeah, I mean
well,
that's the greatest part
yeah.
about it.
Once you start to go down these rabbit holes, for example, uh, many theorists, maybe this is a good time to digress into the world of the Tartarian Empire for just a moment. There's a book that was written by a gentleman named James Lee or Jamie Lee last year. It's called The One World. Let me see, The One World Tartarians, I believe. And that book is the first of its kind to document the existence of this empire. Well, the reason I'm bringing it up is because it's been written out of our history books, and that's why we don't know about it. The Soviet Union has rewritten its history to take the Tartarian Empire out of its history, and we've kind of done the same thing. We don't even admit that that empire existed. Wikipedia calls it an expanse of land in northern Asia, when in fact it was a worldwide empire. Why is it being hidden? Because they had longevity. They had healing centers based on geometry and harmonics. They had free energy that heated their homes and lighted their homes. So, as impossible as it may sound, going and reading that book, there are also some wonderful YouTube channels, John Levy and Flat Earth British being two primary ones that document the destruction of this knowledge and the architecture that used to be in all of our cities. Now it's kind of limited to government office buildings, to churches and other public buildings, but it's everywhere. And once we know where to look for it, we'll find it. But that information has been kept from us and is being hidden from us on purpose. And it's a tragedy. But you go into, for example, some of the Gothic cathedrals in Europe. There are pictures. Are you familiar with cymatics, Greg, at all?
No.
Cymatics is the study of how sound becomes geometry. And just in simple terms, if you had a stereo speaker sitting on your table with the speaker facing up, you could put like 4 poles on each corner, put a piece of rubber on top, put some sand on top of the rubber, and then begin to play a tone. Well, that sand on top of that piece of rubber is going to vibrate, and it's going to turn into a specific geometric form. And this is a great way for people to understand that geometry becomes vibration. There are other examples of that, but these cathedrals in Europe, they have these cymatic diagrams on the floors of these cathedrals. Well, we think that we discovered cymatics in around the 1970s, and that's not true. It's been known for probably thousands of years again. And so another example of this hidden knowledge that We're just losing that information, but it is being rediscovered. And, I hope that people will, have an open mind. There's reasons why all your steeples and all the cymatic diagrams are in these ancient buildings. And the Tartarian Empire concept says that there was a major reset that occurred somewhere around 200 to 300 years ago in our history. There are pictures, or excuse me, maps of California in the 16th and 17th century, and it was an island off the coast of Nevada. And we don't know about that, but all the ancient maps point to that. So there's been something major, or any number of cataclysms or events, manufactured or natural, that have caused for this information, this knowledge to be lost, and for this reset to occur. So we're just really beginning to rediscover all this information. The area around Salt Lake City, for example, the Mormon Temple in Salt Lake City, it has this geometry. Well, when you go and look at old maps from the 16th and 15th century, you're going to find that there were some cities that pre-existed the arrival, so-called, of people from Europe. And this was the Tartarian Empire that had come over from Russia, I guess through Alaska, and had settled this whole hemisphere, and had civilizations here. Chicago, the city of Chicago, is actually shown on a map for 1499. Well, supposedly Columbus discovered the New World in 1492. So how did Chicago end up being on the map 7 years later? Couldn't happen unless it pre-existed. So anyway, it's a fascinating topic, but it's another rabbit hole that demonstrates that all of this information has been lost, and it's been done on purpose. So
yeah, well, it's been fought over, and it's been fought to be suppressed. And that's fascinating about Chicago. That I did not know. That's definitely that's definitely a rabbit hole that I want to go down now.
Well, look up the One World Tartarian Empire and James Lee, and he'll give you a good background on it. And another great video source is again, John Levy, Jonlevi. I subscribe to his channel, and he every Sunday morning, I love it because that's what I see when I get up on Sunday mornings. He produces his retrospective video of the week, and he discusses all this ancient architecture and how it's, what San Francisco, for example, looked like in 1850. Well, supposedly, San Francisco was founded by the 49ers. Well, in 1850, there were thousands of people there. There was wireless. There was wireless electricity. There was all these things, and we don't know about it. So, and again, San Francisco could have been an island or part of an island culture as well, prior to that time. So, there's much more to go through to learn about those topics. So,
yeah, we have a very, very rich and very complex history, and unfortunately, they have dumbed it down and made it very simple and very, very 1, 2, 3 ABC, and that's it.
Yeah. And unfortunately, our society has become, back to the quadrivium and that concept, we have become so reductionist in our thinking that we continue to think that the next new vaccine is what we need to save our health, when in fact what we need is holistic living and holistic thinking to realize that if we live in harmony with our environment, that our natural immune function will thrive, and so will we. So Dr. Galad, who was actually the person in Russia, Alexander Galad, he was in charge of all this research. On his website, pyramids.ru, he says, for example, that he expects life expectancy for people living in these energy fields of the pyramid to extend life by 10 to 15 years. So, I assume that he has some basis for saying that. I've actually I am in touch with him. I haven't heard back from him, but
Hmm.
that's one of the questions that I've asked him because I'm interested in seeing if I could live to be 100 and more. And only time will tell if that's going to happen. But I'd certainly like to know if they've done some research to quantify that. But
Yeah,
there's but these pyramids can also be used for good and evil, Greg. One of the
sure.
things that, and I think that's something that we need to focus on. Any tool can be used for good or for evil purposes. But
Absolutely.
on pyramids.ru, Dr. Gallatin does a question and answer. And as it turns out, in 2014 in Kiev, in Ukraine, during the revolution, which I prefer to call the coup, uh, uh, there was actually a programmed pyramid on the Maidan, which was the public square in Kiev, and it was programmed to foment rioting and violent
Um,
behavior. So, you know, all of
yeah.
this knowledge, unfortunately, our governments know. They know exactly what frequencies will be beneficial to us and harmful to us. But this is information that we're not having access to, and we're having to kind of learn on our own. So, um,
Yeah.
you know, it's tragic, but that's our system, and we're again that's part of the research we want to do. We know that solfeggio frequencies from a mathematical standpoint and so forth, they point to a mathematical model of the universe based on base 9 mathematics or vortex mathematics, and all of those frequencies fit into that mathematical formula. So we know that they're going to be beneficial. But what's interesting, you could take a frequency of 1011, which might be a good one because it adds up to 3 in that system, and it would be positive, but 1010 might be a negative frequency. And it would be harmful to us. So, there's a lot of information that we need to do to get that knowledge validated and out to the public again. So, those are all things we're working on.
That's wonderful stuff. That's wonderful stuff. And yeah, again, it just all goes back to frequency. There's the good frequencies and there's the bad ones. And yeah, unfortunately, the people in power know how to use them both.
Well, they do, and we're having to feel our own way through to regain this knowledge.
Yeah.
Um, a piece of research that might be of interest as well to your listeners. This is getting into sacred geometry stuff, but for those who are familiar with the concept of the Platonic solids, I mentioned that earlier. Uh, these are 5 geometric forms which nature uses. It has been theorized to develop our physical reality. And a gentleman by the name of Buckminster Fuller in the 20th century, he's a futurist. He developed the geodesic domes and so forth. He developed a theory of how these 5 Platonic solids can change from one form to another kind of in an octave. It's sort of like going from the notes up the scale on the piano, and you go through this progression of Platonic solids, and then you end up back with the one where most people start is is the dodecahedron. But you go through from the dodecahedron, icosahedron, cube, tetrahedron, octahedron, and back to that. But I don't. But the key thing is, no one has really ever figured out, is there a geometry to that process, and how does it, how would that work? Well, I was reading a book last fall. This is, sacred geometry geek speak, but the name of the book is Sacred Geometry by Robert Lawler. And Lawler, in the last chapter, begins to talk about Platonic solids, which I had never really thought about in the context of sacred geometry, but he started to give some general information. Well, I wish we had the screen for this because on the last, screen share, but on the last page of the book, there's a diagram that's in 2 dimensions that shows these platonic solids it looks like being nested inside of each other. But I knew that it wasn't nesting, and that would take too long to explain, but I decided many things that are important in our sacred geometry knowledge have been done or written down in 2 dimensions, and they really should be done in 3 dimensions. And so I decided, let me see what would happen if I took that 2-dimensional diagram, and which identified these 9 steps of progression in this octave of the progression of the Platonic solids. And sure enough, when I plotted it in 3 dimensions, there's no geometry other than this geometry that could occur in and have the mathematical relationships of sacred geometry that we find in the 3-dimensional mapping of this. These circles, their midpoints or their apices and their bases, you start getting ratios of the square root of 2 and phi and the square root of 3. These are all sacred geometric forms, are numbers, and they could not occur except inside this geometry. So I really think that, I was going to try to finish up that research before I publish my book. I think that's going to be a lifetime. But I think I hope, that's my goal, before I give this up, that we have been able to develop a geometric dynamic progression model showing how this geometry is sort of it's the pathway for this to occur. There's a lot of there are electron micrographs for example, that show that there's a certain type of structure called a microcluster. It's not the ether and it's not a solid, it's an intermediate state where molecules form, and all of these microclusters, they're micrographs showing that each of these 5 geometric forms can be found in these electron micrographs. So they are obvious. It's obvious that nature does structure matter with these geometric forms. So we're starting to get the pieces. We know that that's part of the process. And now I think this ancient diagram that's in Robert Lawler's book is pointing us to the fact that this geometry is the geometry that's used in nature to create our reality. So that's pretty heady stuff, but that's kind of what keeps me excited by this.
Yeah. I mean, again, that is a lot for those
a lot for everybody.
A lot for everyone to wrap their head around, because people walk out in nature and they just see it for what it is. They don't think of any sacred geometry that created that or that is within that.
Well, I mean, now I grew up in a religious family, Greg, and this is maybe a good analogy. In fact, my brother is a minister, but when I was a kid, I knew that when I prayed to God, and if God answered my prayer, I just said it was a miracle. That was what it was. But as I became an adult, I started going to metaphysical churches for a while, and I started to, wrap my head around the fact that, my thoughts create my experience.
Sure.
Well, if that's the case, then there has to be a process, and there has to be a formula and a mathematics to it. And so that's what we're really starting to discover, that there is a process that this occurs in. And it's a beautiful mathematical, geometric, vibrational, system that ultimately ends up creating our experience. So it's all fascinating stuff. And that's why for me, I've been working from 4 a.m. till 10 at night every day, and it's a joy because thanks to Mark's show, I've got more business than I can handle, and so that's keeping me busy on that front. But the books had to take a back seat. But every day is a joy for me because I'm finding these new relationships, and it's helping me in my understanding to really break free from the stuff that I learned as a child. And
Mm,
we have to understand that what we call miracles or mysticism is nothing more than the science that we don't yet understand. So
yeah,
that's what it's all about. So
yeah. Well, you're waking up every day, Charlie, and you're doing what you love, so it's not work. And
it's not. It's really
no,
not. You know, I take a couple hours off from 5 till like 7:30 every night to be with my significant other, and we do have dinner and so forth. But then I go back to work after that,
yeah,
and the rest of the time I'm just engrossed doing stuff that I love. So it's really fun. So
yeah. Well, it is a intricate, complex, and fascinating universe that is just filled with ancient knowledge and secrets yet to be discovered. Some have already been discovered, such as individuals like yourself, Charlie, and you're bringing it all back to the forefront, back into our heightened states of awareness and heightened states of consciousness. And I really thank you for that, and I know my audience will as well. And
oh
this was
sure, sure.
this was a wonderful and uplifting and very informal chat today. I learned a lot today, a lot more than I thought I knew going into this. I had some knowledge of this before coming into this today, but thank you for taking me back to school and taking my audience back to school and
Oh
laying on
sure,
us
sure.
some of this ancient and sacred knowledge, and things that people don't necessarily have to wrap their head around initially, but we can look at this today as a big seed that was
Well,
planted today.
that's right.
Yeah,
And before we finish, I do want to offer your listeners
sure.
a special coupon if they're interested in any of our products. Well, it's going to be Galactic Greg 10%. That'll if you use that as your coupon code when you check out, you'll get 10% off the purchase of any pyramid. So I think hope your audience will take advantage of that. So.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and
uh,
again, all your information and that coupon code will be within the show notes.
Okay, well, that's
Everyone
perfect.
who's watching this, so it'll be in the show notes. I'll make sure it's all in there. So
Perfect.
yeah, Charlie, this was wonderful. Again, thank you so much for coming on with me today, and
Okay.
for changing up the dynamic a little bit and changing up the
Well,
frequency. And this was like I said, this was very educational and very informal, and I know people will just latch on to this, and this will give everyone something else to kind of dive into. Something that's not as personal or emotional, just something they can listen to and thoroughly enjoy. So again, thank you for coming on with me
all right.
today. And yeah, everyone, Charlie Zeese from the Pyramid Science Foundation. And once again, all of the information for that and the coupon code will be in the show notes for everyone. And yeah, Charlie, we'll do it again and maybe dive even deeper into this stuff. I'm sure you have more to share, so we'll definitely do it again.
I appreciate it. One last pitch I want to make, if I can. The foundation is always in need of money. We've got a lot more research projects than we have funds, so I'm going to give Greg a place where if you're interested in helping us to fund this research, that you can make some contributions to the foundation. So thank you, Greg.
Great. Yes, absolutely. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you again. All right. Take care, everyone. God bless.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.